The suitcase was already by the door, the cab waiting outside, and the silence in the living room felt heavier than the air before a storm. Mark's hands trembled as he zipped his bag, the sound slicing through the quiet like a blade. Across the room, Hannah stood frozen, arms crossed, eyes red, heart breaking in slow motion. After 6 years of trying to fix what was broken, they both knew this moment was coming. What they didn't know was how much it would hurt. But just as Mark turned the doorknob, a small voice cut through the stillness. Soft, trembling, and full of innocence. "Stay with Mommy." Those 3 words from little Sophie changed everything. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. Mark froze. He felt Sophie's tiny hand wrap around his fingers, warm, desperate, pleading. She was only 4, with curls that bounced when she laughed and eyes that mirrored Hannah's. That morning, she had colored a picture of their family. 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Now one of those figures was walking away. Hannah knelt beside their daughter, trying to stay composed. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Daddy just needs some time." But Sophie shook her head, tears already welling. "No, Mommy, Daddy has to stay. You said we pray for family to stay together." Mark's chest ached. He wanted to say something, anything, but words refused to come. The guilt pressed on him like a weight. He wasn't leaving because he didn't love them. He was leaving because he didn't know how to love anymore. For months, their home had been filled with arguments that began over dishes, but ended with years of resentment. Mark's long hours at work, Hannah's exhaustion from raising Sophie mostly alone. The laughter had faded, replaced by sighs, silence, and distance. Mark had convinced himself that leaving was an act of mercy, freeing Hannah from his failures. But now, holding Sophie's small hand, that logic began to crumble. He knelt down, his eyes level with hers. "Sweetheart, Daddy loves you," he said, his voice breaking. I think Mommy and I need some time to—" But Sophie threw her arms around his neck before he could finish. "Then we can pray together," she said simply. "Jesus will fix it." Those words hit him harder than any argument ever could. Jesus will fix it. That night, Mark didn't leave. He unpacked the suitcase quietly while Hannah sat on the couch, watching in disbelief. Neither spoke. The only sound was Sophie's soft singing from her bedroom, a little hymn Hannah had taught her, something about grace finding its way home. For the next few days, Mark stayed in the guest room. The tension was still there, thick, awkward, unspoken. But something had changed. Sophie's innocent faith had planted a seed of hope in both of them. One morning, Mark found Hannah sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, holding a mug of coffee. For a moment, he just stood there, unsure if he was welcome. But then she looked up, her eyes softer than he'd seen in months. "I prayed last night," she said quietly. "Not for us to go back to how we were, but for God to show us how to start again." Mark sat beside her. They didn't talk about the fights, the cold dinners, or the resentment. They talked about the small things, how Sophie had learned to tie her shoes, how the garden they planted last spring had started to bloom again. It was strange how life could give second chances in the smallest ways. Over the following weeks, Mark began coming home early. He helped Sophie with her drawings, made Hannah tea after dinner, and listened instead of defending himself. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was a start. One Sunday morning, Hannah suggested they go to church together, something they hadn't done as a family in almost a... Mark hesitated, but when Sophie grabbed both their hands and said, "Come on, Mommy, Daddy, we can sit in the front," he couldn't say no. As they sat together, Mark felt something shift inside him. The pastor spoke about forgiveness, not as forgetting what was broken, but choosing to rebuild even when you're still hurting. Mark looked at Hannah, and she looked back with eyes full of tears. After the service, Sophie ran up to the altar and placed a small drawing on it. When the pastor picked it up, he smiled. It was 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. That afternoon, Mark found himself sitting at the kitchen table with Hannah, just talking. They spoke honestly for the first time in years. He admitted his fears, of failing as a husband, as a father, as a man. She admitted hers, of holding on too tightly to something she thought she'd already lost. They didn't promise that everything would be perfect. They only promised to keep trying, one day at a time. That night, as Mark tucked Sophie into bed, she smiled up at him and whispered, "See? Jesus fixed it. He kissed her forehead and laughed softly. He's still working on it, sweetheart. Then he walked into the living room where Hannah sat with a blanket draped over her shoulders. He sat down next to her, and for the first time in a long while, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, full of something that had been missing for years. Hope. Mark realized then that love isn't always about the grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about choosing to stay, to fight for what matters even when it's hard, and sometimes it takes the smallest voice to remind us of the biggest truths. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need hope today, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories every week. Before you go, comment below, what would you do if love gave you a second chance? That night, as the rain fell softly outside and the world grew quiet again, Mark whispered a prayer he hadn't said in years, not asking for strength or forgiveness, just gratitude. For the little girl who believed, for the woman who forgave, and for a love that refused to give up, even when it almost did. Because sometimes the miracle isn't in the staying, it's in finding your way back home.